Humans have been discovering fossils long before we ever understood what they actually were. As such, our ancestors came up with all kinds of creative explanations for these mysterious bones and shells that they found in the ground. Get ready for some epic stories. From giant birds to terrifying beasts and even gods, here are 5 ancient myths that were inspired by fossils and prehistoric discoveries. The griffin. The griffin is a legendary creature that has appeared in the mythology of many different cultures throughout history. It usually takes the form of a lion with the head, wings, and talons of an eagle. And although this creature is purely mythical, there are some fossils that may have inspired its creation. When Greek settlers arrived in the Black Sea area around the 7th century BC, they found something odd. Huge bones, unlike anything they had seen before. They weren't from animals alive at their time, but they also weren't exactly from dinosaurs either. They were from ancient whales. You see, the skull and skeleton of a whale are quite different. So when ancient people found only the bones of the flippers, jaws, and teeth, they must have thought that they belonged to some kind of monstrous hybrid animal. Perhaps they imagined a lion-like creature with a beak and wings, or maybe they thought it was an eagle that had somehow grown claws and taken up life on land. Whatever the case, it's possible that these ancient bones inspired the myth of the griffin, which is often depicted holding a fish in its mouth, just like the ancient whales that inspired it. The bird monster. In the Egyptian Book of the Dead, there is a passage describing the death of Osiris. In it, Set, who murdered his brother, hurls Osiris's body into the sea. But strangely enough, the text says that his body didn't sink. Instead, it was carried away by the current until it reached the city of Byblos. There it washed up on the shore and became the mythical cedar tree of Lebanon. This story is strange because there's no mention of mummification or embalming, which would explain how the body didn't decompose. However, there might be a natural explanation. It could have been that when Set threw Osiris's body into the river, it landed in a pile of driftwood and was preserved in the same way that bog bodies were in Europe thousands of years later. The ancient Egyptians were familiar with bog bodies as they traded with the Nubians who lived near the boggy marshes of the Nile. Bog bodies are human remains that have been preserved in peat bogs, and they often appear in an almost lifelike state. This would have been very strange to the ancient Egyptians, who usually only saw dead bodies after they had been mummified. They wouldn't have known that bodies can sometimes be preserved naturally without any human intervention. So it's possible that they invented the myth of the cedar tree to explain this mysterious discovery. The Egyptians also discovered the bones of giant birds, specifically the Molemala. These huge birds lived in Egypt around 10,000 years ago, and they grew to be about twice the size of an ostrich. Their bones were so big that they looked like the bones of a crocodile, and their claws were enormous too. The ancient Egyptians didn't know what these bones belonged to. So they likely used them in religious ceremonies, and they may have even inspired the bird monster Ra, which appears in several scenes in the Book of the Dead. Giant sloths. Giant ground sloths were once widespread across North and South America. They were massive, furry creatures that resembled modern-day sloths, except hundreds of times bigger. They could grow to over 11 feet tall and weigh more than 2.5 tons. The largest of these megasloths was the Megalonyx, and it roamed the Earth as recently as 11,000 years ago. That's right, at the end of the last ice age. It wasn't until around 9,000 years ago that humans began to spread through the Americas. So it's entirely possible that ancient humans and megasloths crossed paths. Some researchers even believe that early humans hunted these creatures. If that's true, then it means that ancient humans would have come across their bones and fossils. And since they had no idea what these belonged to, they probably imagined that they must have belonged to some kind of monster. Maybe they believed that the bones belonged to a gigantic bear or ape, or perhaps they thought that they were the bones of a really tall human who had been turned to stone. Whatever the case, it seems likely that giant sloth bones inspired the myths of many ancient cultures. After all, many tribes from the Amazon rainforest told stories of a giant hairy man named Yoram, who, according to legend, lived in the trees and was covered in thorns. Could he have been based on a giant sloth? Well, it's possible. Dinosaurs. Dinosaurs were once thought to be a myth. We all know that today there's overwhelming evidence that these incredible creatures once walked the earth. But it wasn't too long ago that scientists hadn't even discovered a single dinosaur fossil. Until the late 1800s, the only bones that paleontologists had found were those of birds, which they assumed were normal birds. That is, until a bone was found in Montana that was much larger than any other bird bone ever seen before. At first, the paleontologist who found it thought it might be the femur of a mastodon. Mastodons are extinct mammals that lived during the Ice Age, and they definitely did not lay eggs. But the scientists soon realized that the bone had come from a bird, just one that was very different from the birds of today. Soon after that, more and more fossils were found, and paleontologists were able to piece together what the skeletons actually looked like. They discovered that dinosaurs were reptiles with upright legs and a very diverse range of lifestyles. In short, they were nothing like birds at all. But why were the ancient people so familiar with the bones of dinosaurs? Well, they weren't. The truth is that people have been finding dinosaur bones for thousands of years. They just didn't know what they were. For example, in 1250 BC, an author wrote about finding a gigantic thigh bone while digging a canal in China. He described it as the thigh bone of a heavenly man. And in India, there are many legends of great men named Bali who fought against gods. Some believe that these stories are based on dinosaur bones that were found in India's foothills. But what about the Chinese text? Did the author really find a human-sized thigh bone? That's unlikely. He probably came across the femur of a sauropod, a type of dinosaur that was known for its incredibly long neck and tail and its tiny head. Sauropods were the largest animals that ever lived, and their femurs were roughly the same length as a human torso. Mastodons have been inspiring myths for thousands of years. According to legend, when the hero Gilgamesh embarks on a quest to find the secret of immortality, he comes across a pine tree. The tree tells him that his only hope is to find the mystical plant of life, and it gives him directions to where it can be found. But on the way, the hero encounters a serpent that steals the plant. To this day, nobody knows exactly what animal the mastiff was based on. It could have been a crocodile, or maybe it was an extinct species of whale that lived in the Persian Gulf. But some researchers believe that it was inspired by mastodons. You see, the mastodon was a relative of the mammoth that lived in Africa and the Middle East around 13,000 years ago. Scientists think that it went extinct after humans arrived in the region because, like the woolly mammoths, mastodons were hunted for their meat and their tusks were used to make tools. The oldest depiction of a mastodon was found in a cave in Israel, and it dates back 12,000 years. Whoever drew the image clearly had no idea what it was, as it has the ears of an elephant, the body of a bison, and the legs of a horse. Needless to say, this bizarre creature probably terrified them. And it's very possible that it inspired scary stories that were passed down for generations. Click here to watch one of these next videos and let us know in the comments section if you think that prehistoric creatures inspired ancient myths. And while you're at it, don't forget to subscribe for more videos like these.